Hello Karmaza. In this short screencast, I will be giving you feedback to your summary from last week. So let's just dive straight into it. In this video, the speaker discusses the implicit biases, and mental associations help to reduce the shame and shaming during communicating. Here I'm not very sure, maybe which help to reduce shame? You probably need a pronoun here, relative pronoun. So, okay, good idea to include the title of the video and the name of the speaker, and also you try it here to summarize the main idea. I'm not very clear on this though. He discusses the implicit biases and mental associations help to reduce the shame and shaming during communicating. So I'm not very sure what this is saying here. Are we saying that mental associations reduce shame? He did mention shame at one point, but it was one of his supporting ideas. He was talking about how we need to openly discuss our biases without shame. So you probably shouldn't include that in your main idea. The main idea is simply that the speaker, and by the way, discusses remember we said that the first sentence, we're aiming to make it sound more argumentative, right? So the reporting verb should express this kind of an argument. So remember we keep saying you can use he claims that or argues that, right? And when you use that kind of reporting verb, claims that, argues that, it forces you to use what we call a that clause. He claims that, and then how are you going to finish the sentence, right? It forces you to use a that clause. He claims that we all have implicit biases, but if we take the necessary steps, we can solve the problem, or something like that, right? So that would be the main idea. Here, it's good that you mentioned this shaming, but it would be later on. That would be part of one of your supporting ideas, right? First of all, the speaker gives description and characteristics to the topic and argues issues on racial bias and other lines of difference inadequately and completely done incompletely done and spoken between human beings. Okay, it's a little bit opaque, this sentence, I have to admit. I'm not sure. The first part is sort of clear. He gives description and characteristics to the topic. So he does indeed describe what these biases are. He gives three main characteristics. So I think it's better to just say that. The speaker discusses three characteristics of biases. And you can just end here and say what they are. 1, 2, 3, probably in three different sentences. That might be easier. And it will be much clearer, because right now, characteristics to the topic and argues issues on racial bias and other lines of difference inadequately and completely done and spoken between human beings. It's very unclear what's going on here. I mean, some of these are ideas and phrases that you can hear mentioned in the video: racial bias, lines of difference, human beings, but I'm not very sure what this is saying. So it'd be more clear if you just focus on the first supporting idea. Is basically he discusses three characteristics of our implicit biases, and then you go on and say what these are. Okay, so this is a little bit unclear here, quite unclear, I would say. Right. Some of these biases may often have an impact on how others perceive and may even lead to the exclusion of those who are different. This is a much clearer sentence. Some of these biases may often have an impact on how we perceive others and they perceive us, and may even lead to the exclusion. Very good. So here, this sentence would be very good to put before you've discussed the characteristics of the three biases. First of all, after the main idea, he mentions implicit biases and what we can do about that. Some of these biases may often impact on how others perceive us, so that's a very good sentence. Although here, others perceive who? It's a bit incomplete. We perceive each other, or perceive on its own, you need to say what is being perceived. Perceive who? So this is what we call a transitive verb, and you cannot leave it on its own. It needs something. You perceive an object, you perceive somebody. Some of these biases may often have an impact on how we perceive others, and may even lead to the exclusion of those who are different. That's actually quite a good sentence. It would make a nice introduction to the topic. And then you go and talk about the three characteristics. First he says that, second he says that, third, right? These biases, remember he was saying they are unconscious, they're very quick, and they often run contrary to our own stated beliefs. So these are the three characteristics, and you can just discuss those in three sentences. That would be much clearer. So up to here, that's what you're going to do. The speaker continues to prove that always there is a case and there is a bias, which is preference for a prejudice against a person who considers to be effective solutions to the problem of the suppression of difference. Now that is again unclear. Another of those opaque sentences. The speaker continues to prove that there is always a case and there is a bias, which is preference for a prejudice against a person who considers. Up to here I can sort of understand. We are prone to biases. We are often in situations where we experience those biases, prejudices against others, so that much is clear up to here. But then I'm not sure about this part. It's quite difficult to understand what you're trying to say. Who considers to be effective solutions to the problem of the suppression of difference? Remember, up to here you've discussed the three ideas, right? That's what you need to do. The three characteristics. And then what else does it do in that talk? After that, it basically discusses the three recommendations, three solutions to the problem. These are things that we can do to address the issue of biases, of our own implicit biases. And again, you can just say that. The speaker goes on to discuss three recommendations. We need to first do this, then do that, then do the other. And again, it'll be much clearer if you structure the paragraph that way. Because here I'm just not very clear what's going on. Okay, so you need to clarify that here. I think part of the problem is you're trying to use academic language, which is good. You know, I can see some of these phrases, they pop up in your summary, and these are phrases and words you heard in the talk, which is good. But it's much better just to be clear first using simple language and then try and write the summary. And it's better to be clear using simple language than to try and force yourself to use academic language and be unclear. So it would be probably better just to start with a little sketch, like a scaffold. What am I going to say in this summary? First, I'll start with the main idea. Then I will talk about the 3 characteristics that he discusses. And then I'll discuss the 3 recommendations. And then I'll end with a conclusion. And it's as simple as that. Because right now, I really don't know what this means here. So, moreover, here now, now we're talking about the characteristics of implicit bias. But this should have been discussed earlier, you see. You should start with that. The characteristics of implicit bias. Operate at the subconscious level, very good. And run contrary to our conscious beliefs, there you go. Actually, you've tried to combine 2 of those in one sentence, which is good. But this should come much earlier. And again, this is a very clear sentence, and that's the type of sentence you want to include in your summary. Concise, clear, with good sentence structure. So this is clear. Just move it up a little bit forward, earlier on in the paragraph, right? Move up. Therefore, the speaker claims several reasons for that, as it's an issue because an expanded diagnosis of the problem, and it is predictive and preventive. Okay, so a little bit unclear, but I know what you're trying to do here. You are trying to, again, combine in one sentence those 3 recommendations. It might be better here to just separate the 3 and use a sentence for each one of them, and just say the speaker mentions 3 recommendations. First, we need to be aware of the problem. We need to diagnose it. Then we need to be predictive and preventive, and then you'll explain what these things mean. So the first half would be 3 characteristics, and the second half of the paragraph would be the 3 recommendations, and then you end with a conclusion. To sum up, the speaker finishes his talk with that everybody needs to do internal change work. Here, with that everybody needs, with the idea that, right? With the idea that, with a claim that, something like that. Everybody needs to do internal change work, which definitely reduces shame of race diversity. Again, you're just really piling up those keywords here, but they don't make sense grammatically, which definitely reduces shame of race diversity. What does that mean? All of these are keywords, and it's okay to use them, but you want to express the ideas more clearly. So you tried here in the final sentence. To sum up, the speaker finishes his talk with a recommendation, or by stating that we can we can change ourselves first and then produce change in the world by starting to solve our own biases, something like that. I'm not saying it very well here, but that's what you can say in the final sentence, right? Which is the final thought of the whole video. So overall, just work on a very simple structure first. That should help you be more clear on what you're trying to say in these summaries. That's what I would recommend. And always read it out loud to yourself. And if you try and read this out loud, you will see that it will not make a lot of sense to you. So always try and express the ideas more simply, because that will be much more clear than just trying to pile up academic language. But the structure you try to follow is good. Sentence, supporting ideas, conclusion. Okay,